black snow fell in geometric patterns, defying gravity and wind alike. From the church tower, I watched it trace sacred geometries across Vijay's streets, mandalas of frost that pulsed with an inner light that shouldn't exist. My right hand trembled as I tried to light a cigarette, the flame wavering in air that had no business being this cold in late spring. Below us, chaos erupted through the village center. A group of locals had commandeered Petrov's logging truck, their desperate attempt at escape ending exactly as I'd expected. The engine block transformed into a solid mass of ice, barely 50 yards from the village limit. The driver's door hung open, frost patterns already creeping across the window glass like hungry fingers. "They'll try the South Road next," Dmitri said, his experienced eyes scanning the growing crowd. The morning light caught the burn scars on his weathered face. The young ones always think they can outrun what they don't understand. I took a long drag, watching the smoke spiral up to join the unnatural clouds. How long before the rest panic? Not long. Look. A fight had broken out near the frozen truck. Two men, brothers, by their similar broad-shouldered builds and red hair, were shoving each other, their voices carrying up to us in sharp fragments. "Can't just sit here. The elders know what. All going to die if we..." The scuffle ended when an elderly woman in a faded headscarf struck both men with her cane. Even from here, I recognized the authority in her bearing. Anna Volkova, one of the village's respected matriarchs. The brothers separated, shame-faced as schoolboys. "We should get down there," Dmitri said, "before someone tries something worse than a truck." The church's ancient stairs creaked under our descent. Each step brought us closer to the fear-thick air at street level, where the temperature dropped another impossible degree. Dog's claws clicked against the worn wood, his head low and alert. We found Father Mikhail in heated discussion with Yegor, the eldest of the Mansi spiritual leaders. Mikhail's white beard couldn't hide how his jaw clenched with each word, while Yegor's leather-dark face remained carefully neutral. The two men stood in the church's entrance, surrounded by flickering candles and overlapping symbols of faith, Orthodox crosses and ancient Mansi pictographs sharing the same sacred space. "Blasphemy to suggest," Mikhail was saying. "Look at your own walls, Father," Yegor interrupted, his voice carrying the weight of mountains. He gestured to where frost crept along the stone. "Notice how it stops where our ancestors' marks meet your holy signs? They knew. Your predecessors knew. Pride is a poor shelter against what comes." I stepped closer, studying where the frost indeed halted at precise points, places where half-hidden Mansi symbols merged with Orthodox patterns. My trembling hand traced one such intersection, finding it warm to the touch despite the surrounding cold. "He's right," I said. "This isn't coincidence. Your church was built on purpose here, wasn't it?" Yegor's dark eyes fixed on me. The old ones understood. When the black snow fell before, they worked together, Christian and Mansi both. "There are more marks below," Maria's voice came from the basement stairs. The anthropologist emerged into the candlelight, dust in her grey hair and excitement in her eyes despite the situation. Whole sections of foundation stones carved with protective sigils, integrated into the Orthodox cornerstones. A crash from outside drew us to the door. A group of younger Mansi, I counted 5 of them, none older than 20, had formed a circle in the street. They clutched papers I recognized from Maria's library, attempting to recreate ancient wards with more enthusiasm than wisdom. "Stop them," Yegor said, real fear in his voice. "They don't know the proper..." but it was too late. One boy, barely 16 with a wispy attempt at a beard, began chanting words he clearly didn't understand. The black snow around them swirled, gathered, concentrated. The screams started immediately. 3 of the boys dropped, clutching their hands, where frost crawled up their fingers like rapidly growing fungi. The smell of burning flesh filled the air, but it was a burn of deep cold rather than heat. Dog barked a warning as people rushed to help. I caught glimpses of the injuries as the boys were hurried into the church. Blackened flesh, geometric patterns of ice growing from within the skin itself. Their faces contorted in agony while fog leaked from their open mouths. "Fools," Yegor muttered, but there was more sorrow than judgment in his voice. "They think knowledge without understanding brings power. They forget why we learn slowly, carefully, through years of preparation." Maria emerged from tending the wounded, her face grave. "We need the full ritual, the proper one, not these fragments, but crucial pages are missing from the archives." My mind flashed to the symbols I'd seen in the cave system, carved into living rock. "I think I know where to find them, but first, we need to see what else survived from the last cycle." We made our way to the library, Dog growing increasingly agitated as we approached. The building's windows were dark, despite the morning hour, the black snow falling thicker here. Inside, Maria led us through stacks of dusty volumes to a back room I hadn't noticed before. "This is Natasha's copies," she said softly, glancing at Dmitri. His wife's name hung in the air between us, another ghost in a place already too full of them. "She knew," Dmitri said, his voice rough. "She made copies of everything she could find, hidden them away. Said she had a feeling." A crash from the front of the library cut him off. Dog's growl turned into urgent barking as shadows moved against the windows. The temperature plummeted. "They're here," Maria whispered, already tracing protective symbols in the air with practiced fingers. I recognized the gestures from the manuscripts, old Mansi wards against cold and darkness. They came through the front doors, like a wave of winter itself. Local faces I recognized, now transformed by patterns of frost across their skin. Their eyes glazed and distant, moving with the jerky coordination of puppets on strings. I counted at least 6 before they spread out among the stacks, some looking like they fought against their own movements. "The back door," I murmured to Dmitri. "Get Maria and the documents out. Dog and I will keep them busy." But Maria was already pulling books from specific shelves, revealing symbols carved into the wood behind them. As she touched each mark, they began to glow with a subtle warmth. The cultists' advance slowed, some crying out as they hit invisible barriers of heat. We retreated to the basement with armfuls of documents, barricading the heavy door behind us. While Maria and Dmitri searched through the papers, I studied our pursuers' faces through a high window. Ivan the baker, Nina from the post office, young Pyotr, who'd served me drinks just days ago. All of them claimed by something ancient and cold. The journals of the previous ritual wielders painted a grim picture. Success required more than just knowledge. It demanded connection. Looking at my trembling hand, at the faint patterns of ice beginning to trace themselves beneath my skin, I understood what that meant. The entity was already reaching for me, had been since I'd first set foot in this place. Dawn painted the window in false warmth as I read the final warnings. The price of containing Kholat Syakhl was high. Whoever performed the sealing ritual risked being consumed themselves, drawn into whatever dark space the entity called home. My phone buzzed. Elena's message appeared on the screen. Found something in my brother's files. Coming to Vijay. The patterns in the snow, they're not random, they're... The message cut off. Through the window, I watched the black snow continue to fall, writing messages I was only beginning to understand in a language older than human tongues. Dog whined softly, pressing his head against my leg. He knew what I was considering, what price I might have to pay to end this. I scratched behind his ears, remembering another time I'd failed to protect someone I loved, wondering if I'd fail again. "Morgan," Maria called softly, holding up a page covered in familiar symbols. "I think we found it. The full ritual. But..." She didn't need to finish. I could see the cost written in the ancient words, in the frost patterns spreading across my skin. Some mysteries demanded more than just solutions. They demanded sacrifice. Above us, the cultists continued their inhuman chanting, their voices harmonizing with the wind that wasn't wind at all, but rather the breath of something vast and ancient stirring in the mountain's heart. The entity was waking fully now, reaching out with fingers of black ice to reclaim its domain. I looked at my companions, Dmitri with his quiet strength, Maria with her hard-won knowledge, Dog with his unwavering loyalty. Then I looked at my hand, where the frost patterns grew more intricate with each passing moment, and knew what had to be done. The true price of mystery isn't in the solving, it's in what solving costs us. And as the black snow fell in its impossible patterns, I prepared myself to pay whatever price was necessary to end this, before the cold took us all. Maria looked up from her translations, worry etching deeper lines around her eyes. Even in the warm candlelight of the church, frost patterns had begun forming on the windows, spreading like hungry fingers. "We need to move," I said, my right hand trembling as I pocketed the phone. The tremor had gotten worse since we'd started investigating the ritual sites. Every time I touched something connected to Kholat Syakhl, the cold burrowed deeper into my bones. Through the church's frost-covered windows, movement caught my eye. 3 figures in dark clothes dragged someone, toward the mountain path. A flash of familiar purple fabric, Elena's coat. "They have her," Maria whispered, her fingers clutching a worn piece of parchment. The anthropologist's usual academic composure had cracked, revealing raw fear underneath. "We need Nikolai's help." The police station's lights flickered as we entered, casting strange shadows on the walls. Nikolai sat at his desk, a bottle of vodka untouched before him. The local police chief had aged years in days, his once pristine uniform now wrinkled and stained. Dark circles under his eyes spoke of sleepless nights. "I knew you'd come," he said, pulling a weathered folder from his desk drawer. "After what happened at the Sacred Grove." He spread photographs across the desk. Ritualistic murders spanning decades. Each victim bore the same crystalline patterns we'd seen on the recent bodies. "Victor needs a specific type of sacrifice," Nikolai continued, his voice hollow. "Someone marked by the entity through blood ties to a previous victim. We tried stopping him before, in other cycles. The failed attempts..." He pushed forward a particularly gruesome photo. I turned it face down before Maria could see it. "Elena's brother," I said, the pieces clicking into place. "Victor killed him deliberately, to mark her." Nikolai nodded grimly. "The blood connection makes the sacrifice more potent. Victor's been planning this for years." At Maria's house, the anthropologist's hands shook as she spread out her research materials. The walls of her study were covered in maps and diagrams, strings connecting seemingly unrelated events. Dog paced nervously, occasionally growling at shadows in the corners. Here, Maria pointed to a passage written in ancient Mansi. The vessel must be prepared by blood, marked by loss, bound by grief. Victor didn't just kill Pavel for power, he did it to create the perfect sacrifice. A knock at the door made Dog's hackles rise. Nikolai entered, carrying a rolled-up map marked with Russian military annotations. "I've mapped the safe routes to the ritual site," he said, spreading the map on Maria's desk. "Years of watching, documenting sacrifice attempts. Let them fire me. This has to end." The base of the mountain was eerily silent when we arrived. A group of Mansi elders formed a circle, their chants barely audible over the howling wind. Yegor, their leader, approached us. Age had bent his spine, but his eyes remained sharp as obsidian. "The old ways, remember," he said in heavily accented English. "We have marked the safe paths with protection symbols." He handed me a small pouch of herbs and powders. "But be warned, Victor's control slips. His followers turn against each other." The truth of Yegor's words became clear as we ascended. The first body lay face down in the snow, back riddled with bullet holes. Another cultist sat propped against a rock, frozen solid in mid-flight. Their faces showed terror rather than religious ecstasy. A wave of black snow forced us to shelter in a narrow cave. Ancient markings covered the walls, warning signs, Maria explained, mapping areas of supernatural activity. Dog wouldn't stop staring at the cave's rear wall, though I saw nothing there. The tunnel system was a maze of ice and stone. Dog's nose led us forward, following Elena's scent. The cold grew more intense with each step, until breathing felt like swallowing glass. Near what Maria identified as the ceremonial cavern, we found them, 3 cultists huddled in an alcove, their robes torn, faces streaked with frozen blood. One woman, barely older than Elena, grabbed my arm. "Victor's lost control," she gasped. The ice patterns on her skin pulsed with a sickly blue light. "The entity, it's changing him, changing all of us. Elena fights the preparation ritual, but her body..." She pulled up her sleeve, revealing crystalline growths spreading beneath her skin. "We all end up like this eventually. Please, stop him." I looked at my own hand, where similar patterns had begun to form. The tremor was constant now, a reminder of what awaited if we failed. Dog pressed against my leg, his warmth a small comfort in the supernatural cold. Nikolai checked his pistol, though we all knew conventional weapons meant little against what we faced. Maria clutched her bag of protective herbs, muttering phrases in ancient Mansi. The woman grabbed my arm again, her skin burning cold through my coat. In the final chamber, Victor thinks he'll control it, but he's wrong. The entity doesn't serve, it consumes. Elena was just the key to unlock the door. The rising wind carried sounds of chanting from deeper within the mountain. Dog's growl echoed off the ice-covered walls. Whatever waited in that chamber, we were running out of time to stop it. I flexed my trembling hand, feeling the cold pulse through the crystalline patterns spreading across my skin. The woman was right. We were all marked now, touched by something that should have remained sleeping in the mountain's heart. The only question was whether we could stop it before that touch became a killing embrace. Up ahead, Elena's scream echoed through the tunnels, mixing with sounds that had no place in our world. Dog pressed closer to my side as we moved forward, toward whatever horror Victor had awakened in the depths of Kholat Syakhl. The cold intensified with each step, but we couldn't turn back. Not now. Not when we were so close to the truth that had claimed so many lives, and threatened to claim even more. The ancient evil that slept in these mountains was stirring, and we were all that stood between it and the world above. The snow crunched beneath my boots as I approached the ritual site, each step marking the border between our world and something far older. The zone, a perfect circle of death carved into the mountainside, pulsed with an otherworldly energy that made my right hand tremble inside my pocket. Dog pressed against my leg, his warmth a stark contrast to the unnatural cold radiating from the center of the clearing. Victor stood there, transformed from the meek assistant I'd first met into something that barely clung to humanity. Ritual markings crawled across his exposed skin like frost on a window, geometric patterns that hurt my eyes to look at directly. The stolen Mansi artifacts surrounded him in a precise constellation, each piece positioned to channel energy toward the improvised altar where Elena lay bound. Her eyes met mine, alert, despite the frost patterns already spreading across her skin. The same patterns her brother had shown in the morgue photos. My throat tightened at the memory of similar markings on the Dyatlov Pass victims. "You're just in time, Mr. Graves." Victor's voice carried impossible harmonics, like wind howling through ice caves. "To witness the correction of an ancient mistake." The air around him shimmered with cold so intense it distorted light itself. Stolen Mansi guardian statues stood at cardinal points, their stone eyes weeping trails of black ice. The medallion at the center of the arrangement pulsed with a deep blue luminescence that seemed to drink in what little warmth remained in the air. A figure burst from the tree line, Maria, clutching ancient texts to her chest, her face flushed from the climb. Her eyes widened as she took in Victor's transformation. "It's worse than I feared," she gasped between breaths. "He's not just channeling it, he's becoming it. The texts warned about this. A host, prepared over decades." Victor's laugh shattered the air like breaking icicles. His skin had taken on a translucent quality, revealing crystalline patterns growing through his veins like frozen lightning. "Your precious texts. So much knowledge, yet so little understanding. Did you really think your ancestors trapped Kholat Syakhl here? They merely delayed the inevitable." I edged closer to the nearest guardian statue, remembering Maria's instructions about the ritual circle. Every movement had to be precise. One wrong step, and the cold would freeze the blood in my veins. "The military knew," I said, keeping his attention, while Maria began muttering protective incantations. "They weren't studying the phenomenon. They were containing it, using you. Using me?" Victor's flesh rippled like water beginning to freeze. "I used them, their resources, their authority, their blind ambition, all to reach this moment." The transformation accelerated. Chunks of Victor's body began to splinter off, hanging in the air like dark crystals around a rapidly deteriorating core. What remained of his human form twisted into impossible angles, reconstruction itself into something that rejected the very concept of warm-blooded life. Dog's growl resonated at a frequency that made my teeth ache. I'd never seen him show aggression like this. Not anger or fear, but recognition of something fundamentally wrong. "The cold is truth," Victor's voice had become a chorus of frozen screams. "Look at the universe, Mr. Graves. Vast, empty, cold. Life is an aberration, a temporary state of disorder in the perfect crystalline silence of space." Each word frosted the air, patterns of ice spreading outward like cracks in reality itself. Elena struggled against her bonds, the ritual markings on her skin beginning to glow with the same deep blue as the medallion. "Heat death of the universe," I said, taking another careful step toward the nearest statue. "That's what you're trying to accelerate." "Death?" The thing that had been Victor laughed again, and I watched the sound waves freeze in the air, geometric patterns hanging like lethal wind chimes. "This is preservation, perfection, the end of change, the end of loss." The words struck deeper than the cold. Loss. The empty room in my apartment I never opened. The yellow dress I couldn't bring myself to pack away. The tremor in my hand that started the day she vanished. "Loss is the price of life," I said, my voice rough. "Without it, nothing matters, nothing grows." Maria's chanting grew stronger, ancient Mansi words of binding and containment. The guardian statues began to resonate, a deep harmonic tone that made the black ice coating them crack and reform in new patterns. Victor's form completely shattered, the fragments orbiting a core of pure darkness and absolute cold. When it spoke again, the voice carried the weight of ancient glaciers. "Growth is corruption, change is decay. I offer eternity, frozen perfect and unchanging. No more pain, no more uncertainty, no more children vanishing into summer afternoons, leaving fathers to drown in questions without answers." My hand trembled violently now, but not from the cold. It had been in my head all this time, watching, learning, using my own loss against me. "You're right," I said, taking the final step into position. "Questions without answers are hell, but they're also what keep us human, keep us searching, keep us alive." I nodded to Maria. She reversed the flow of her chanting, and I felt the circle of power shift. The guardian statue's resonance changed frequency, pulling at the fragments of Victor's transformed body. The medallion's pulsing became erratic. The entity that had been Victor screamed in frequencies that shattered the hanging ice crystals. "You cannot unmake this. I am the truth of empty space, the final state of all things." "No," I said, my voice steady despite my trembling hand. "You're just another mystery, another question, and that's all you'll ever be." The medallion cracked. Reality seemed to bend inward as the entity fought against the reversed ritual, its form twisting through geometries that hurt to witness. Victor's remaining consciousness screamed in harmonies that would haunt my dreams, sounds of absolute zero, of atoms frozen to perfect stillness, of heat death come early. The final separation was violent, a sudden implosion of darkness and cold so intense it felt like a physical blow. When my vision cleared, Victor's body lay shattered like black glass across the snow. Only a single crystal remained intact, pulsing with that deep blue light, a prison containing a fraction of what we'd confronted. Elena's bonds had frozen brittle and shattered. I helped her sit up, checking the ritual markings on her skin, already fading, already warming. Dog pressed against her other side, offering what heat he could. Maria's voice was hoarse from chanting. "It's not destroyed, can't be, but it's bound again, deeper this time, sleeping." Nikolai and his men finally reached us, their boots crunching on the fresh snow. They moved cautiously, weapons drawn but useless against what we'd faced. What could bullets do against the heat death of the universe given form and malevolent purpose? I picked up the crystal that had been Victor's final remains. Even through my glove, I could feel its absolute cold. This would go to the Mansi elders. They'd guarded such secrets before. they'd do it again. The sun broke through the clouds, warming the zone's aftermath, but I knew the cold would linger in my dreams, in my memories, in the tremor of my right hand. Some mysteries weren't meant to be solved. Some questions were safer left as questions. I looked toward the horizon where the mountains stood, indifferent to our struggle. Dog nudged my hand, reminding me it was time to go. Time to leave this case in the past with all the others. Time to keep moving, keep changing, keep living, despite the perfect, frozen silence that waited between the stars. The crystals of black ice never melt. Even now, 2 years later, they sprout from cracks in the floorboards of my apartment during the darkest hours, their jagged edges catching the dim light. Dog watches them grow and shrink, his ears perked at sounds I can't hear. The crystals bring memories of that night on Mount Kholat Syakhl, of Victor's body dissolving into the supernatural wind, of philosophies as cold as the void between stars. My desk groans under the weight of case files, some new, some decades old. Among them, a worn manila folder contains what little I know about my daughter's disappearance. My fingers brush across a photo of her smile, now creased and faded. The knowledge I gained in those frozen peaks has changed how I view her case. Every shadow holds new possibilities. Every unexplained detail whispers of truths beyond conventional understanding. The crystals pulse faintly in rhythm with my trembling right hand. I've learned to read their patterns, to understand how they mirror the heartbeat of greater mysteries. Dog lifts his head, his amber eyes fixed on the window, where dawn paints the city in shades of grey. The phone rings, cutting through my contemplation. The voice on the other end quivers with familiar fear, the kind that comes when reality cracks and something impossible seeps through. Mr. Graves? They found another one, a bull, split open like a textbook diagram. But the organs, they were frozen solid, in August. I press my palm against the cold surface of my desk, feeling the vibrations of something vast stirring beneath the skin of the world. Tell me about the lights, I say, knowing what comes next. How did you... Yes, lights, above the fields, moving in patterns that hurt to look at. And the crop circles aren't circles at all. They're equations, Mr. Graves. Equations burned into the wheat. Dog paces to the window, his claws clicking against the floor in that uneven rhythm I've grown to trust. The morning light catches his grey muzzle, highlighting scars earned in service of truth. Like me, he's learned that every answer we find only reveals deeper questions. I open a fresh notebook, its pages blank and waiting. I'll need the address. The crystals of black ice retreat into the shadows as sunrise claims the room. But I know they'll return tonight, as they always do. Some mysteries mark you forever, changing not just what you know, but what you are. And somewhere in that vastness between what we understand and what we fear, answers wait like stars in the void, cold, distant, and burning with terrible truth. The game begins again,